By March of 1915, all Canadian soldiers were actually banned from having cameras or taking photographs, and especially from sending their photographs home or to the news. But because the ban on private photography wasn't working well, and because newspapers were desperate for images, a pretty intrepid newspaper man named Max Aitken, who would later become Lord Beaverbrook, he set up an organization called the Canadian War Records Office, or the CWRO. And in April of 1916, the CWRO finally got permission from the British War Office to send one photographer to the front whose work would be censored and sent to the newspapers. Canada's first official photographer was Captain Harry Noble, who was a British-born photographer who had settled in Port Arthur, Ontario in 1899. He joined the 1st Canadian contingent in 1914 from Port Arthur, and he actually fought for the first 2 years of the war until he traded in his rifle for a camera, and he became our first official photographer. So he was replaced in August of 1916 by a British press photographer named Ivor Castle. And so Castle, he arrived on the Western Front just in time to photograph the Battle of Courcelette, which was Canada's contribution to the Battle of the Somme. And he's obviously very famous for having photographed the Battle of Vimy Ridge. Does anyone recognize this one by a show of hands?
Yeah.
This one's kind of special because we now know that it was staged after the war. And that's, again, another reason why it's very critical to know who took the photograph. Is it one that we could consider a trustworthy image of people going into battle? Maybe not. So it's really good for us to ask questions. And another one where we have the same image on one side with some dead bodies and some shell bursts, and then on the other side we have no dead bodies. But what's actually very interesting is that the dead bodies were added into this one. So Castle was a pretty good photo manipulator, and he actually showed us dead bodies. Historian Laura Brandon tells us that she thinks, and I think it's a very good thesis, that this was meant to show us the cost of victory at Vimy, that it did actually require a pretty big Canadian sacrifice. He then left in the summer of 1917 to organize an exhibition of Canadian war photographs, and was replaced by another photographer named William Ryder, who was on the Western Front for battles like Hill 70, Passchendaele, and the 100 Days.